everybody. Welcome to Will and Drew's Gaming Retrospective. You are listening to episode 113 for the week of February 14th, 2021. I'm your host, Drew, and I am joined by my Valentine, Will. What's going on, dude?
I was not expecting that, man. I appreciate that. I mean, I don't have a dozen roses for you, but I can be here virtually. That's the best I can do. How the hell are you, man?
Dude, I'm great. I'm really happy to be here. I'm excited to talk about some games with you tonight. We were questioning whether or not this would actually happen again because once again, Connecticut is in the process of being ass fucked by another weather system. And there was potential that I would be staying at a hotel again tonight. It seems like it's not going to be as bad as they originally planned. Yeah. So thankfully I am home tonight and I get to talk to you.
Well, what's the latest bullshit update? Are we supposed to get an ice storm later tonight?
Yeah, so I guess parts of the state are going to see anywhere from a quarter to a half an inch of ice overnight. It's primarily upstate Connecticut. So unfortunately, it could happen in your neck of the woods. Down near me, where I live, I'm kind of in the middle of the state. Shouldn't be too bad. By the shore where I work, it's not even going to be an issue. But it's supposed to start happening overnight. In fact, when I was on my way home, it was already starting to rain and the temperature was hovering around the freezing mark. And, I just don't feel comfortable driving when the roads are icy. I don't mind snow. I have a, all-wheel drive vehicle that I love, and I feel like I'm a competent driver, but I have hit black ice before. I have spun out in the highway. It is scary as shit, man, and I don't want to do it again. And I do not trust the assholes on I-95 to drive like proper human beings.
Absolutely not. I don't blame you, man. That must have been terrifying.
It was, and I'm so fortunate that I didn't get into a serious accident when that happened. It was a long time ago. I'm really, really fortunate because, that hill going into the tunnel at Route 15, how it does that big nosedive down in New Haven just before you get to the tunnel. That's where it happened. And I was not driving fast, but I couldn't stop. Like the roads were just a sheet of ice. I couldn't stop. I did a 360 and everything, and there were cars behind me, and was very, very lucky. So,
oh my word,
I don't want to go through that again.
No, even just think about that. It just gives me chills.
Yeah. I mean, it really could have gone a lot worse than it did. So.
Well, I'm glad it didn't, man.
Thank you. Me too. Because then, I wouldn't have a video game podcast.
I mean, Jesus. Yeah, not to sound morbid, but my God. It's like, yeah, I'd be in a coffin 6 feet under and I wouldn't be here, So
yeah.
But damn, yeah, no, I tell you what's scary, man, is like when you're driving really safe in a snowstorm or it's bad road conditions and then you see somebody flying past you. That's really scary as well, because then you realize that their irresponsible driving could cost your life.
Exactly. That's the thing I have, I think, the biggest issue with. Like, if I'm on a packed highway and everybody's doing, a nice, comfortable, reduced speed, and maybe you're passing somebody on the left-hand side or whatever, but you're still doing a reduced speed. Like, that's fine. But when you have these people, and I really do hate to generalize, but it tends to be people in pickup trucks and SUVs, primarily pickup trucks. They're flying by. What's that?
They get cocky.
Super cocky. And like, I remember with the last storm that we had, last week, like I was coming home and I saw somebody in an SUV on the opposite side of the road do the same thing I just talked about. They spun out, and I don't know if they were going too fast or what the deal was, but thankfully nothing happened to them. The car that was behind them had plenty of room between them. They were driving safer. And so yeah, it's crazy. And Killer Sirach in the Twitch chat just noted that Texas had a bad pileup over the weekend. I think it was like 100 cars. People died.
I heard about that. Lauren told me on the way home, man. And I was like, now's not the time, honey.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's terrifying, dude.
Yeah. So if you do have to drive out in this and you live in any of the areas that are affected right now, please be safe. Take your time. you'll get to where you're going when you get to where you're going. Just don't rush it. Give yourself extra time, and if you end up being late, well, it's not worth your life.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing, man, because when there are snowstorms, sometimes it's bad to drive too slow and then it's bad to drive too fast. So you really do have to learn over the course of time of your time living here in New England, like how to drive properly. And it's
It
not
yeah.
not something that comes, the first go.
It's a skill. It's
It is a skill.
absolutely a skill. And unfortunately, the only way to figure it out is to fuck up.
Yeah, you have to
Hopefully
fuck up.
you don't hurt anybody when you do fuck up, like I remember when I was younger, I would take my car out into like an empty parking lot that hadn't been plowed yet, and I would just do donuts in there, and
Smart.
intentionally cause my car to fishtail and go in directions it shouldn't, and I gained a comfort level doing it that way. If that's what you got to do, go do it.
That's pretty smart, man. I think more
Yeah.
people should do that. Know what your car is capable of and know
Yeah.
what you're capable of doing as well.
It's super important to know the limitations of you as a driver, your car, and it's, I think, even more important to know what your car feels like, so that, like, you got to be in tune with that kind of thing. Like, feel what your car is like on normal conditions, because when you hit a patch of ice, the only way you're going to know is because shit's going to feel weird,
Oh yeah.
Otherwise it'll be too late. So
Yeah. Be careful, folks.
anyway, now that we've had that morbid conversation.
Yeah. Jesus. Back to the driving in bad weather conditions podcast.
How the hell are you otherwise?
I'm well, man. I'm excited to be here just as you are. And I feel like for some reason, I don't know if you feel this way. I just feel like we haven't done a show, and that's obviously not true at all. But I'm just standing here thinking like, man, I feel like I haven't done this in like a month.
It does feel that way. It's so weird.
It is.
I think we just both had stuff going on over the weekend, and we didn't really talk too much. So,
We did. Yeah. Sometimes, most of the time we're connected almost daily, but sometimes we get busy and we're doing the whole adult married thing. And, I've been working a new job and you've been busy at work, and it's just, there's been a lot going on.
I've been working weekends too, which doesn't help, but anyway, well,
But we're here.
we are here. We have a wonderful show planned. I'm super excited about it. Let me just get our business out of the way first, and then we can dive right in. What do you think?
Sounds good to me.
All right. So, folks, first of all, check us out on the web at www.wdgrpodcast.com. Of course, we are available on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WDGRPodcast. We have this lovely Twitch channel, which if you are tuning in to us live right now, thank you for joining us. If you'd like to tune into one of our broadcasts, we record every Monday, weather permitting, at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time on twitch.tv/WDGR podcast. Of course, Will, if somebody would like to find you, how can they do so?
Sure. You can check out my music at soundcloud.com/will_gear.
And you can find me on Twitter at ScionStorm. So, yeah, man. We have a lot to talk about today. Where are we going to start?
Well, here's the thing. We could do a couple things.
Yeah.
We could discuss what we have been playing briefly.
Yeah.
Or we could jump right into our 2 reviews.
Let's talk about what we've been playing first, shall we? What have you been playing lately?
Well, to be honest, I have taken a small hiatus. I was really doing very well with Gravity Rush 2, and I have no intentions on straying away from it, so that's good. But yeah, that's what I've been playing. I just haven't played recently, just because, again, for folks that don't know, I just did start a new job, and this is week 3 for me now, so I've been pretty focused on that. And yeah, just some other stuff around the house, so I just haven't had a ton of time to really just hunker down. But yeah, I plan on getting back to it this week, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. For anybody that's not played it, I highly recommend just checking it out on YouTube. There is a Gravity Rush 1 that was remastered that's also available on PS4. And this is a Sony exclusive. So if you have a PS4, then you can play each game. And it's really unique. And I think that I don't want to divulge too much because I'd rather wait for the review, but I'm having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, I actually have a copy of Gravity Rush 2. I picked it up on sale for like $10. And, it was one of those games I'm like, yeah, I'll get to that.
Sure.
And it's just been kind of sitting there collecting dust. And I do want to check it out. I absolutely want to play it. I have had no experience with the Gravity Rush franchise, but it seems like a lot of fun. Seems like the kind of thing that, I would really dig.
That's a solid price too, because when I got it, I'm pretty sure I paid like 40 for it, and it
Mm.
definitely is worth 40.
Hmm.
But you've got an excellent price point there at $10.
Right now the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One games are just kind of in that sweet spot. If you're looking for some great deals on some stellar titles, they're out there right now. This is the time to buy some of that stuff for sure.
Yeah, and I'm not affiliated with PS Prices, but thanks to you,
Mm,
that website has been an absolute gem in my bookmarks bar
yeah.
that I check often. It's fantastic, and I'm pretty sure it does all platforms. It's not just PlayStation.
I believe so. I don't remember off the top of my head, but that does sound about right. Yes.
Excellent website. You
So,
can set alerts to go to your email when a game goes on sale.
mm,
You can build a personal collection. I think it's absolutely fantastic.
awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I need to spend some more time with that. I'm afraid though, because like I've been trying, well, like, I know it's February, but I feel like I'm still recovering from the holidays, like,
Dude, if it makes you feel any better, I actually just removed it from my bookmarks
did you?
because it was becoming too much of a problem. I was like, you know what?
Oh,
I just got
goodness.
this like little purchase from work, and I picked up a couple other things recently off of Amazon. I was like, you know what?
Yeah.
It's right time that I like delete this because it's just going to become like a habit where I'm like, you know what? Let me snag this for a quick fiver.
Yeah.
Let's grab this for 12. And you know how it goes, man.
Oh,
You
yeah.
stockpile too much, and then before you know it, you're like, shit, I spent like $60
Yeah.
on games, and then I'm not going to get to them. So right now it's temporarily deleted.
That's probably wise. Do you remember the Steam summer sales by any chance?
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah.
Dude, they're running some sort of a sale for, well, at least they were for Lunar New Year. And I got an email from them when that went live that 25 items on my wish list were on sale.
Oof.
And
That's how they get you, man.
I saw that in the subject heading, and then I immediately deleted the email without opening it because I'm just like,
Smart man.
I can't, and like I don't even do that much gaming on the PC anymore. It's very rare when I'll sit down with a PC game, so I just don't need to be tempted with that.
Dude, I sat down to do some music a couple weekends ago, and I sat down. I had an intention on writing something, and then before I got started, I was like, you know what? Let me just browse Native Instruments real quick to see if they got anything going on,
Oh
and that was a
God,
mistake because they did, and they were like, oh, 60% off Heaviosity products. I'm
mm.
like, ooh, let me take a look here real quick, and then I think it was like $134 later. I was like, whoops.
Yeah, yeah,
But I mean, they had some fantastic deals, and I'm glad I did it.
mm.
But ultimately, they were libraries that were not really needed. They're just
Mm.
going to help like augment some stuff. And I was like, shit.
Yeah.
I sort of regret doing it, but I don't. But it's dangerous, man.
So
It's really dangerous.
when you buy one of those packages, do you feel compelled to use every single instrument in a song?
No. So generally, what I do is when I pick up a couple new libraries, or even if it's just one, I'll try to create a track with just that to kind of challenge myself.
Mm-hmm.
Just see, can I create a song after, or just kind of around this new library and nothing else. And then
Mm.
sometimes I'll incorporate 3 or 4 libraries. It really depends on what my intentions are.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah,
Very
I
cool.
mean, I've had some tracks feature 1 to 2, and then others that are like 10.
Wow. That's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, it's a long process. Lauren hates it when I do music because I'm pretty much done for the day.
Yeah.
Like if I sit down, I'm like, "Hey, honey, I'm doing music." I might as well just be completely checked out for the day because it takes me a long time
Mm.
to get something that I like.
Yeah. You got to get like a music cave. You can get like 4 walls, right? So you put your gaming systems in one wall, you put your music stuff on another wall. I don't know, a salt lamp on the third wall or some shit. And
A plaque of like coconut water or like a shelf just all of empty cans. I drank
oh,
this one back in '83.
oh God, you got to like write the date on them and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. It's like smell. I'm like, don't touch it.
Oh God. So
Too funny.
anyway, I've been playing Cyber Shadow. Have you heard of this
Mm.
game?
I've seen you mention it in Discord, and I've
Mm.
done zero research.
So it's very much a throwback game to games like Ninja Gaiden. When I first saw teasers for it, I thought visually it kind of reminded me of a game called Ninja Spirit. But now that I've played it, it really doesn't size up that way at all. It is a hard game. But it is also the kind of game that, like, I think the speedrunning community is taking like a hold of, right?
Hmm.
You play as a ninja, and it's got kind of a science fiction vibe going to it, where you're really dealing with machines and creatures and things like that rather than other ninjas. You're not like slashing dudes. Platforming is challenging. Timing your strikes is challenging, and of course, you're micromanaging your resources as far as your health goes, as well as your secondary attack, because you have a life bar, and then you have SP, which will allow you to do, like, say, a shuriken throw, or perhaps like an uppercut with your sword. And each one of those attacks will take away from that SP, and you could recharge your SP by killing certain enemies. They'll drop it. They'll also drop occasionally currency, which you can use to purchase like temporary upgrades at save points.
Hmm.
So, for example, you might go to a save point and it'll say spend 50 coins to unlock the ability to recharge your SP for you automatically. Most of the save points by default will recharge your health, so those are kind of nice to rely on. And then there'll be like a third option: spend currency to gain access to a weapon, like a sword enhancement. Maybe it's like an energy ball that shoots whenever you swing your sword, or perhaps it's like a wave that adds some distance to your sword, or a shield. And you'll drop 50 coins on that, and every time you use that save point from then on forward, that upgrade will still be there for you. But there is only a finite amount of resources, so it does require some careful planning, I would say.
Fair enough. Sounds kind of fun.
It is fun. I think, coming off of Strider a while back, I think this is the kind of game that would be appealing to you if you're looking for something that is challenging but seems to have a pretty short length to it. This is the kind of game that I feel like once you kind of get the rhythm of it down, you could probably sit down and beat it in an afternoon without much trouble. For me, I suck at video games, so I'm spending a lot of time dying and trying to figure, out what the fuck I'm doing. But,
Yeah.
like if facing a boss and figuring out the pattern of the boss is up your alley, and memorizing stage layouts so you can kind of platform your way through stuff quicker after your second or third or fourth death, this is the kind of game that's going to be for you. And I'm having a lot of fun with it. I'm determined to beat it. And yeah, I think it's worth checking out.
Well, that's just it, man. You said at the end there that you're determined to beat it. Those kind of games have that effect.
Yeah.
When they're so difficult and there's a lot of memorization, I think there's something in the human psyche that makes you driven to actually complete a game like that. So I think that I would probably enjoy that.
Yeah, very much so. I tend to, when I encounter a game that really pushes me, I tend to kind of revolt against it. So like the first few times I played this, like I was like controller throwing into the TV, kind of angry.
Jesus.
And one of the nice things about the Series X, and I assume the PS5, is how quickly the systems load up and will reload a game that's in progress. So I've been kind of relying on that quite a bit, where I will, if I hit a wall that I just can't get past, I'll just walk away from the game. I'll shut the system off. I'll go do something else. And then when I'm ready to play it again, maybe the next day, maybe 2 days from now, I can just turn the system on and I'm back in it again. I don't have to go through this whole process. I don't have to worry about backtracking to a save point. I'm just in the game. And I found that, for me anyway, having the freedom to do that at such a easy way is just been, it's been nice, I'm not punishing myself for doing a bad job. I'm recognizing that I'm getting frustrated, and I'm stepping away from the game, and I'm coming back to it when I'm in a better mental state.
Smart.
And it's been working out well. I just I'm at this boss right now that I'm really struggling with, and I've kind of gone back to it twice, and I still haven't figured it out. So I'm gonna give it one more try. I think probably Wednesday or Thursday. I'm gonna sit down with it and really just put my nose to the grinder and try to figure out the pattern. What do I need to do to get through this? And if I can't figure it out, I might look up some videos on YouTube, but I'm really trying hard not to do that.
Hey man, we've all been there. I certainly
Yeah.
have, and I go through the same process. I try not to, unless it's like it becomes a Plan Z measure.
Oh
Let's
yeah.
put it that way.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Plan Z. So,
Well, let me ask you this
yeah.
too. You mentioned that you had a couple moments where you wanted to kind of throw your controller at the TV, kind of rage. Obviously, we're not doing that because we're not 12. Walk me through, walk me through the process of when you have that moment. What are you actually doing? Because I'd like to share what I do.
Well, it's funny that you bring this up because I could tell you what Nikki does.
Honey, put it down.
So this is why I love her.
Okay.
2 or 3, maybe 4 days ago, right? I'm playing the game and I'm like, this fucking dragon! I can't figure out this pattern. And she's reading her book, and she just takes her book, and she's sitting next to me on the sofa. So she just takes her book. You know, honey, back in the day, games were hard.
God damn it! Why do you have to be right? Right?
And I just looked at her. I'm like, well, you fucking play it then.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. That is amazing. I would have said the same thing to Lauren. I'm like, you want to try? You want to try, tough guy?
So,
classic peanut gallery comment. Yeah.
It was priceless. And this is coming from the woman that like whoops my ass in Donkey Kong Country. So she does, but which is infuriating because she's not a gamer. She does not play video games at all anymore. But every once in a while, we'll fire up the SNES and she'll grab that controller. She'll just start zooming through Lion King, or she'll zoom through, Donkey Kong Country. She'll make me look like a chump when it comes to Mario. But yet she's not a gamer. Go figure.
Yeah, that's so funny. I mean, Lauren's like that with Tetris Effect. When I gave her that game to try, I mean, she was just god tier. Within like 10 minutes, I'm like, what is going on here? You don't game. Start videotaping. I was like, check this out.
I remember.
For me, dude, it's kind of more classic. I guess it's just something along the lines of like, oh my fuck. And then I'll take a moment with the controller in my hand, and I might put it down, and I'll literally like stare out the window.
Yep.
Just motionless for like maybe 2 minutes, and then I try again.
Yeah.
But for me, like when it happens again, say like 5 minutes later, I do this exact same thing again. So it'll be like, oh my fuck, controller down, stare out the window. It's very like this weird routine. And then sometimes you catch people, they'll scratch their head, go back, scratch their head, go back every single time they die. I've seen people do that when they're playing like Call of Duty and stuff. Every time they die and they get frustrated, they have like a tell, almost like a poker face. Or lack thereof, but
I do that too. I mean, not the head scratching per se, but I'll have like a tell that I'll do. I'll usually like, I think, slap my leg or something, or sometimes like if I'm really at it, I'll take my controller and I'll twist it like I'm trying to break it in half, even though I can't. Like
what's scary is when you hear the plastic kind of crack a little bit, and you're like, all right, that's enough. That's enough.
Yeah.
I'm holding like $70 in my hands.
Oh man, yeah. Majid Killer Sirach says there's a meme there, but quote, but I'm not a gamer, and yes, that is accurate. Oh man, I'll have to get some footage of her next time playing. One of these games that she just destroys me at. So, and
the worst part is they do it nonchalantly too.
Oh yeah, it's like no big thing. But then I'll be like, oh, you want to play Doom Eternal? No. Actually, watching her play first-person shooters is one of the joys of my life because it is hilarious.
Dude, I bet you it's a lot of like this kind of stuff. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, it's mostly
like, how do I go forward?
It's mostly like staring at the floor and spinning in a circle.
Oh yeah. And then they say something like, "This is fun," and you're just like, "Oh my god, oh my god, this isn't your 12th birthday party, all right?" Give me the control.
Oh, anyway. Well, why don't we start diving into our reviews? What do you think, man?
I think it's a good idea.
So I'm going to start things off today, and I'm going to talk about Haven. And this is a RPG that I played on the Xbox, but it is available on all platforms as far as I'm aware. And if you are looking for a colorful RPG that has a focus on storyline rather than fighting and gameplay mechanics of that nature, I think this will be something worth looking into.
I'm all ears, man. I'm curious about this game.
Yeah, I think it's something that ultimately you may want to check out. Although I don't know if it's the type of thing that will stick with you for the full length of the game, because it is a long game.
Okay.
But initially what drew me to the game was this promise of an adult-oriented RPG that focused on exploring relationships between two people rather than your typical save the world from imminent danger kind of stuff that most RPGs do.
Sure.
It has very colorful graphics, and honestly, one of the big selling points was the fact that it was on Game Pass. So I'm already a subscriber to that. I got to download and play this game for free. I'm like, let me give this a try. This seems like it could be pretty good. What I ended up finding was a game that was a little bit more casual on the traditional RPG elements than I was expecting, and it leaned really hard into exploration, and these downbeats between the two characters that illustrate their backstory, their relationship, through extensive dialogue. The game focuses on two characters named YU, and Kay.
Okay.
And they are, it's never established how long they've been in a relationship, but they have been in a relationship for a long time. They're young, I would say maybe the late teens, early 20s, but they're not new lovers. Like, they've been together for a while. And the reason I bring this up is because you come into this game with their relationship already established. You're not witnessing them falling in love with each other as you did with countless other RPGs where the hero meets the beautiful girl and they just magically fall in love and happily ever after, right? You're going into this knee deep, and they fight with each other, they argue, they make up, they have absurd amount of sex apparently, and it's just it's a very lived in relationship, where they're very comfortable making jokes and jabs at each other, and they're there for each other. The two of them have fled to an uninhabited planet called Source. And this planet is very mysterious. It's almost been destroyed because the planet is broken up into fragments. And you don't know why or how this happened at first. Throughout the story, that does become laid out for you. And those are details I will not go into in this review.
Okay.
But the fragments are joined together by this magical mystery element called flow. Kind of looks like the life stream from Final Fantasy, except it's blue instead of green. But just to kind of give you that kind of picture of what it is. And the flow is everywhere in Source. There are flow threads scattered throughout each area each fragment that you're on. And then there's much wider bridges that will connect one fragment to the next. And this is where the exploration part of the game comes into play. Essentially, your characters will fly around in one fragment, explore, harvest different plants, fight some of the creatures that are there to gain experience and save them more or less, which I'll get into in a bit. And then once you've thoroughly explored the area, you move on to the next one. You came to Source on a ship called the Nest, and the Nest seemingly took a pretty hard landing when it landed on Source. There's quite a bit of damage, and you need to fix it. So you are looking through each fragment of the world to try to find parts for your ship to repair it.
Okay.
And as you're exploring, you'll start to find that you also need food. You need to cook. You need to harvest these things. Maybe find some seeds so you can plant a garden. Bring them back to your ship. Cook dinner. You build your relationship with each other, and you're bouncing back and forth between the two characters, you and Kay, the entire time. So you're not just focusing on one character. You are playing as both. And throughout the cutscenes, it's not even cutscenes, like you're in the ship, you're walking around, you're interacting with different objects. You cook dinner, you have a conversation, you sit down for the night, you go to bed together. One of them will usually make some sort of a sexy, risque joke. They'll probably have sex. They don't go graphically into that, but the language is heavily heavily
centered around that.
yeah, for a good chunk of the game, and it's a little bit annoying. I'm not gonna lie. After a certain point, it does get a little heavy handed, but
Interesting.
overall though, it's not too bad, right? As you start to explore out further and further, you start to encounter this red material called rust that is scattered all over these fragments, and you find that the flow that you are able to harness and use to fly around from place to place will actually get rid of the rust. It'll disrupt the rust. And the rust comes across as sort of an infection. It infects the land. It infects the flora and the fauna. And some of the animals and wildlife on Source will attack you. So you get into a battle with it. And at the end of the battle, you free it from the rust, and the rust goes away, and the animal just walks off. And interestingly enough, the animals will like sometimes circle back to you and come up to you and give them a little scritch on the chest or give them a little pat on the head. And they're like your best friend. Now they'll start following you around. So it adds a nice little touch to the game because like you're not killing these things, you're freeing them. Essentially, your characters are doing a good deed by saving this wildlife rather than harming it. And throughout the battles in the process of freeing the land of the rust, you can collect some of it, which at some point you will begin to use for upgrades as well too. What sets this game apart, I feel, from other games is the story. Right, you have a strong bond between you and Kay. They're in love. They've been in love for a long time. It's not a new relationship. This is a relationship with two very different personalities that love each other dearly, but occasionally they piss each other off. You know, whether it's intentional or unintentional. Maybe somebody will say something, the other one will make a witty comment, and now there's a fight. And it's an innocent witty comment, but it's, as anybody who's been in a serious relationship for any long length of time knows, sometimes you just say something stupid and it pisses people off, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And that plays out. And as I mentioned before, you're not focusing on one character. You're constantly playing as both of them. So when you have a dialogue scene and both of them are talking at the same time, you could choose between what your next word will say. And sometimes within a conversation, you'll go from K to you, back to K, and select the dialogue. So it's very interesting. You know, you're playing as them collectively, never separately. What else? Let's see here. I've already mentioned that the dialogue does get kind of risque. Thankfully, towards the end of the game, they do start to back off on some of the sexy talk, but they are, without a doubt, the two horniest 20-year-olds in the galaxy.
Oh my gosh.
It's kind of absurd. And I think for some people it may kind of be off-putting, quite frankly.
Interesting.
You know, I was playing the game with Nikki in the room, and she did make a couple wisecracks about it. At some point, I'm like, look, I didn't write it. So, but ultimately you do find out why they're on Source, why they're alone, what the secret of Source is, and why their planet, known as the Apiary, is hunting them and after them. So it's a deep story, to some extent. You know, I think on the surface, it's a tale that we've heard before, but it's well executed, in my opinion.
I mean, it looks gorgeous. I actually have a video playing in the background just as you're speaking.
Yeah, it's a beautiful game. You know, I might as well talk about the visuals right now, actually. Colorful, bright, it has a bit of a cell-shaded look to it. When you're in a dialogue section, you do have a anime-inspired look to it. The characters will pop up on the screen, flanking the left side and the right side of the screen, but the in-game graphics will still be behind them, and you can see, so like perhaps they're having a conversation with each other, but they're sitting on the sofa inside the nest, right? You could see you with her head on Kay's lap, and then you'll have the dialogue bubbles, essentially, with the two talking back and forth. As I mentioned before, you know, it is an absolute gorgeous game. It's very colorful. It's got this nice cel-shaded look to it. There's a lot of attention to detail where it counts, but there's some definite stuff that's been glossed over too. Like when you're looking at their faces in game, I do feel like the details are lacking. When you're looking at the anime inspired characters, there's certainly a ton of detail there. So it really depends on the setting and the situation. But overall, I think it's a very good looking game. When you're out in the world and you're in an area where there's a lot of danger, stuff with the rust, for example, that tends to be covered in reds. When you are in a safe area where you've already cleared the rust or where there is no rust, you're looking at greens, blues, very peaceful, calming colors. And, I played this mostly on the Series X, but I did play it a couple times on the One X as well, too. And this is a game that was optimized for the Xbox Series. It ran a lot smoother on the Series X. Graphically, it looked the same, but I'm pretty sure I was locked into 60 frames per second the entire time.
Nice.
So it was a very smooth experience. I didn't notice a huge difference jumping down to the One X aside from the frame rate. You could tell there's definitely a drop in frame rate there.
I'll tell you what I do like is the dialogue pop-ups. I know Persona 5 and there's some other games that have that sort of anime cel-shaded look that have that dialogue feature. And I do like that because it just kind of presents them right on the screen and you can, choose what you want to say. And it's just, I don't know, I like it.
It's interesting that you say Persona 5 because one of the reviews that I came across actually compared it to a combination of Persona 5 and Journey. And I can see some of the similarities there. There's some glaring differences in both cases, but I can understand where they're coming from, perhaps.
Especially that sort of floating aspect of you kind of traveling around with the sort of almost like rocket boosters or like rocket roller skates almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
Similar.
Your character, they have these essentially magnetic boots that allow them to fly around the levels, and walking is really discouraged. It's very slow. There is no run. You're either walking or you're flying. And, it kind of reminded me of Journey in some ways, and it kind of made me feel like what I think Gravity Rush might feel like. Again, having not played the game, it's hard for me to say for sure. But one of the main aspects of this game is essentially surfing those flow threads that I mentioned before. And those threads will allow you to get to places that you can't get to under normal circumstances. This is how you find some of the hidden stuff in the game. It allows you to traverse the area faster. It allows you to find things that maybe are a little bit less obvious. Like maybe you're trying to clear all the rust in an area and you're not sure where that one or those final pieces of rust are. Well, you can follow the flow threads in the stage and they will bring you to those pieces of rust. And it very much feels like you're surfing a wave. You even have the left trigger will allow you to kind of like do a tight turn. So as you're surfing on these flow threads, you have to be very precise with your controls, because if you fall off, there's no penalization, but you do have to do it again. You fall, you've got to get yourself back up and start again. And some of them are pretty challenging. It can be quite difficult. So doing those tight turns and kind of hugging them snugly is a key element of, surfing those waves, so to speak. But
it's nice to look at, when you're drifting along, like it's aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very relaxing game outside of combat. One of my favorite things to do is just kind of fly around. And your characters will do some pretty cool stuff together too when you're flying. Like, for example, if you have like a straightaway that you're on, the two of them will fly side by side and they'll hold hands and they'll kind of drift along together. There's actually an achievement for that. It's fairly easy to get. So if you're playing the game, it's definitely worth seeking out. But, you can switch between U or K simply by pressing down on the direction pad. And one of them does not have any advantages over the other as far as their abilities or even in combat, because when you're in combat, you're controlling both of them as well, too. Essentially, with combat, you are kind of working between a mixture of active and turn-based combat. Kay will be playing on the left-hand side, you is on the right-hand side. That never changes. And their actions are sort of splayed out simultaneously using your cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west. And you issue the commands by holding the appropriate direction on either your direction pad for K or using the face buttons for you. So they try to do it in a way where perhaps like a physical attack is going to be the outside 2 buttons, whereas a ranged attack would be, excuse me, the inside 2 buttons. And then you have the ability to guard, and you have the ability to capture or release creatures once you've gotten their health down to 0. And then you can kind of do a team up attack eventually once you've reached a certain threshold with your experience, where the 2 characters will perform the same attack and cause more damage. Now, the balance with this game really comes into play when you're in battle. You need to have one character that's guarding and the other character that's doing the attacking pretty much at all times. And when the person is guarding, it'll block for both of you. You could go through a sequence where you'll guard 2 or 3 attacks, and then you have to switch because the barrier is no longer generating enough force to deflect those attacks. You start taking damage. So it's this balance between, first of all, figuring out whether or not the enemies you're facing have a weakness to physical or ranged attacks, and then jumping back and forth between having one character guard while the other one is actively engaged in combat. And you can't just switch back and forth. Oh, maybe you will do the guarding, then the next one will K, then back to you. Like, you have to actually exhaust the shield because the other shield won't be charged up in time. Like, so you have to use that 2 or 3 times, and they'll give audio cues. They'll talk to each other back and forth where they'll be like, I can't really hold the shield up anymore. So after that attack, maybe the other one takes over.
I gotta say, man, again, I still have a video going on in the background, which just helps me visualize what you're talking about. I feel like there are very few games that have this concept of having a permanent companion that you're fighting with like this. And I know some may argue that, but in this format where it's just like a relationship, like a couple being together, I don't know if I've ever seen that before.
It's an interesting dynamic for sure, and the 2 of them are working together constantly. They are in it together. They eat together. They rest together. They're constantly conversing with each other. There's always dialogue happening. They're very much one unit, and it's tastefully done. I think
it shows, man.
Yeah, there's a lot of heart and soul in this game. I'm trying to think. I jumped around a little bit, but let's see here. Flow threads. We talked about using the flow bridges to get from planetary fragment to planetary fragment. Eventually, you start to come across some buildings, and there's a mystery that revolves around them. You can go into those buildings ultimately, and sometimes you'll find some goodies. Nothing that's like really game changing, but stuff to enhance the story a little bit. And unfortunately, when you do go into a building, for the most part, they really don't show you what's going on. I think that's a missed opportunity. But you do get dialogue from them. You'll hear them have a conversation about something silly. Maybe they'll find a board game that, they remember playing when they were growing up, or one of them will encounter a book, things of that nature. Stuff that doesn't impact your abilities in the game or your XP or any of that stuff. It's just another layer of the onion to the story.
What's cool too is like when it transitions from one scene to the next and you get that little loading screen, you see them like, with a hairbrush in their hands, or they're eating. And it's really cool because I feel like that seems to kind of remind you of the bond that they have.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of the game revolves around those downbeats of day-to-day life. The act of cooking a meal is a huge part of the core of this game because first of all, you have to harvest the items to cook them, right? And there's a whole slew of recipes that you have to figure out on your own. Certain vegetables, certain fruits mixed together will create certain dishes, and the access that you have to dishes that you prepare while you're out in the world versus what you have to prepare while you're at the nest are very different. Not only do they give you that experience of trying different things with different recipes, but you're also gaining health for every dish that you cook, and you're gaining experience points. And those experience points will ultimately allow you to upgrade your characters on a very basic level. But, you're looking at HP boosts. Maybe their attacks are stronger. Maybe they learn a new joint attack, things like that. So, I mean, the gameplay I think is solid, but it's not perfect. Like, for example, with when you're in battle, you have no way of controlling, that I know of, which enemy you're attacking.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be a major source of frustration, especially in the late game, when you have enemies that are resistant to certain types of attacks, when you have enemies that can heal themselves, or you have enemies that can resurrect other enemies. There are certain times where it really is in your best interest to focus on the boss and ignore the other characters, because the boss will keep regenerating the other characters. And if I'm in the middle of targeting the boss and the boss regenerates a side character, now all of a sudden my targeting will switch over to that side character without my permission. And that could be very frustrating.
Sounds it.
Yeah, it was certainly a source of annoyance on more than one occasion. Fortunately, it doesn't happen too often. There are not that many boss characters in the game, but it is something to watch out for.
I could see the resemblance or the comparisons or journey the more that I look at some of these actions. Like I think you called them those bridges.
Yes.
What are they called?
The thin ones or the thicker ones?
It's a blue stream that you constantly follow in the air.
Flow threads.
Yeah, flow threads. Yeah. That definitely reminds me of Journey. Some of the atmosphere is very similar, including some of those sort of home-based structures where you can like camp out and make food.
Yeah.
There's that block sort of statue-like thing that's in the ground that has a circle in it.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure there's something in Journey that's very similar to that.
I think you may be right. It's a very familiar looking artifact,
Yes.
Let's see here. What else? Well, we talked about the visuals already. Music. This game has one of the best modern soundtracks I think I've heard in a long time.
Wow. Bold.
It is.
Like
it caught me off guard, man. It really caught me off guard.
Mm-hmm. It's a good thing.
It is. It's an electronic soundtrack. It's kind of along the lines of EDM sort of thing, but not fully. Okay. It doesn't dive into that completely. The artist that composed the soundtrack is a French composer by the name of Danger. And I guess he has a couple other albums. This is the first time he's done an album for a video game, and I did a little bit of research on it before we started recording. I guess he took a different approach to the composition process with this game than he would for a normal album. So I want to kind of look into that a little bit more and check out some of his other songs. He is available on Spotify, so I assume he would be on Apple Music as well. And the music is super catchy. Frequently I'd be sitting down playing the game with Nikki next to me, and she would start just bouncing her head. She'd close her eyes. Awesome. She'd do this little thing with her hand, like she's getting that groove going. She'd start humming the song. And I'd turn over and look at her. Sometimes I just put the controller down and just let the music play, and she'd just be in the zone. And it is catchy as shit, man. It really is.
That's awesome, dude. I'm going to have to check it out.
Yeah, I think you'd like it. I threw up a song for Music Monday last week, I believe. And that was probably one of the catchiest ones, but they're all really good. I would highly recommend it. And it perfectly encapsulates that science fiction world that they've established, where it's like mysterious yet like welcoming, and it encourages that exploratory feel.
I'm intrigued, man.
Yeah, I think it's something you would like.
Okay.
Now the rest of the sound design I think is a bit of a mixed bag. The voice acting is excellent. I neglected to look up the names of the voice actor and actress that play U and K. I apologize for that because they did a wonderful job, and I think they need to be recognized for that. These characters go through an entire range of emotions, from flirty to angry to hungry to tired to annoyed. This is a pretty fleshed out script, and they do a lot of reading. It is a dialogue heavy game, and every single element of dialogue has a voice to go with it. There are no strictly text screens at all at any point in this game. So the actors killed it. But when you start getting into battle, for example, the two of them will be communicating back and forth with each other. And it's those audio cues that let you know whether or not maybe somebody's shield is down. But like, let's say somebody gets hit, right? One of them will say, "Are you okay?" And the other one will be like, "Yeah, I'm fine," going back into attack. And they have this constant dialogue back and forth throughout a fight, but it's the same canned phrases over and over and over again. So it gets sick, just like annoying really quickly. And there were points where like I would actually consider turning off the volume on the battles. It just it was just too much for me, man.
Repetitive and just monotonous.
Absolutely, very repetitive and monotonous. This game also tries to co-opt its own swear, which is common sci-fi trope. Battlestar Galactica did it famously with frack. In this game, they use the word bloot, BLOOT, and if I never hear that word again, it will be too soon. It is just, it doesn't work for me.
Oh my gosh, balut.
BLOOT.
Well, what's funny about the frack thing from Battlestar is I remember when Trump was debating Biden. For anybody that watched that, they were talking about oil fracking.
Yes.
And the next day, everybody was like, "What the fuck is fracking?"
Yeah. It is a very destructive thing to our environment. But anyway.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. Balut that shit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, bloot it. So that brings me to memorable moments, and there's two scenes that I think really stood out for me, and it's tough to talk about them without diving into spoilers. So I'm going to do my best not to reveal anything here, but there's a very memorable scene where you plays a guitar for Kay for the first time. And there is a story behind it, so I'm going to keep it vague, but the music for that moment is just absolutely gorgeous. It's just this finger style, very basic, simple piece, and it's beautiful. And, leading up to it, she's very shy about playing guitar in front of him. She hasn't played in a long time. She's nervous about doing it. And, as a musician myself, I have not played my guitar for Nikki very many times. For me, and I realize that every musician is different. For me, it's a vulnerability that I struggle to deal with. I can go on stage in front of hundreds of people and play and not give a shit because
you don't love them the same.
Yes, exactly. I think that's really it. Maybe this is something you can identify with. I don't know if you've ever felt comfortable playing something for Lauren, not necessarily like recorded music is different, right? You can just press play and just let it go. But like sitting down and like playing piano for her can be a very revealing moment, a very vulnerable thing.
Oh yeah, I've made plenty of mistakes where I've practiced something on piano and it was flawless, and I was like, "All right, perfect. Let me show this off to Lauren." And then it's like, me like a 5-year-old on the piano because I'm trying to do it for her, and she's like, "Honey, you thought about practicing a little bit more?" And I'm like, "You know what? I had it, and you ruined it."
Yeah.
So, and then you start blaming them. But no, I know exactly what you mean, man. I think it really is you're opening up your heart to somebody that you care about, deeply. So it's really hard to have everything kind of come into place on those moments. And versus, a crowd of live people, you think it would be the other way around.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. It blows my mind, but it's like one of those things that I struggle to get past.
Oh, for sure. You and me both, man.
And the game deals with that, in its own way too. And I thought that was really heartwarming and touching. It spoke to me. And there's another moment in the game as well too, where the two of them discover a hidden beach, and they have a moment to themselves. And again, I don't want to go into details about it because it does tie in with multiple story events, but it's a nice like step away from the reality of the game because they're kind of in the thick of things and they're just taking a moment to themselves to step back and relax. And it's a pleasant departure from the stress they're under. So that brings me to my final thoughts. It is not a short game. I want to say I put in about 30 or so hours into it. I was not able to get an accurate count from my Xbox as far as the time played because the
Of that
game.
weird issue.
Yeah, the game does have an in-game clock in the settings menu, but I'm pretty sure it was counting my suspended state as well too, which is really bizarre. And if I bring it up now, it'll tell me I had like 170 hours. And I know I didn't play that much. Like that's just that's just not possible. But I'm pretty sure I put
Yeah.
in a good 30 hours. HowLongToBeat.com says you can mainline the story in about 15 to 20.
Okay.
I don't see how, but I explored every single possible fragment of source that I possibly could.
That's why.
And the length of the game could turn some people off, but I think if you are willing to play it to completion, you'll be rewarded with a wonderful story about a relationship between two people that love each other very dearly and will literally go to the ends of the world to be together. It leans on exploration pretty hard at times. And those that are completionists will feel like they're exploring those extra regions for little to no reason, because those explorations ultimately don't give you anything worth upgrading your character or making you more powerful. It's just another layer on the story. But that said, the battle can be a mixed bag. It can be a little frustrating at times, but the focus of the game isn't on those battles, it's on those downbeats and the story. And while I found a lot of these sexual conversations between the two dominated the early story too much, it does eventually balance out, and it wasn't enough to turn me off from the game and from seeing things through. So ultimately, I'd give this a 7.5, and I think it's a solid 7.5, and I think it's a well-deserved one.
Well, that was a solid review, man.
Thank you.
Bang up job there. I honestly think that I'm interested. Enough to at least explore researching the game further.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would necessarily buy it because that's just not something I'd recommend anybody doing without doing more research. But I think that review was enough to, like I said, just kind of intrigue me and learn more about this bond because I've never seen a game show so much, put so much attention on a bond between two characters. I mean, I've seen it before, God of War and Last of Us and stuff like that, but it's interesting because this time it's a couple, it's a
Right.
romantic couple, and I think that's what is the most interesting thing about it.
And it's very refreshing to see it handled in an adult way too. Even if it's young love and teenage love, or I mean, to me, they come across as being in their 20s. They're both, out of school, educated. One of them is an engineer, the other one's a botanist, right? So they're adults, but they're young adults. And to see this sort of a relationship explored from an adult perspective in a video game, which is traditionally a medium that's not so adult, it's very refreshing, and I think it's worth checking out. If you have the opportunity to play it, definitely play it. I think you'll enjoy it.
Ultimately, man, I agree. And I love the fact that a lot of these unique games are kind of coming to the forefront at such a unique time in gaming and a unique time in the world that we live in. And I think it's a nice escape to play a game like Haven with everything else that's going on.
Sure. And I think it's also worth noting too that like with the current surge of indie developers that we have, they have the freedom to do games like this. We're not relying on AAA studios to tell the story. And I have no faith in a company like Electronic Arts or, even somebody like CD Projekt Red or Bethesda to tell this story the way they did. Not that those two companies can't, because they do tell very mature games, right? They do have very mature stories, but just something about this, I think, dove into a spectrum that those AAA studios would never have otherwise gone to.
Certainly seems that way.
So let's talk about your choice, man. Uncharted 3. You've been flying through the Uncharted franchise at a breakneck speed. Tell me about your
I would agree with
experience.
that. Yeah, I mean, like as listeners know, I started out with Uncharted 4. I completed that, loved it, then went to Lost Legacy naturally, and then I went back to 3, which was kind of an interesting order to play these games. For folks that don't know, I did play 1 and 2 many moons ago. played a little bit of 3, never finished it, and then you know the rest. So I went back to 3 because it felt right to complete the only game in the series that I had never beat.
Mm.
So I'm glad I did. It's funny, I in preparation for my review, just while taking notes and stuff, I looked up a review online, and the title was like Uncharted 3 is an amazing game and one of the most frustrating games out of the series.
Huh.
And I was like, I got to read this because there's some truth to that sentence. And I made a note of a term called dude raider because I was like, wow, that really does sum up Uncharted.
Mm.
Because apparently in that review, when the first game came out, it received a lot of criticism, and some people or one person coined it dude raider because they were seeing it as like, oh, this is just Tomb Raider, but it's a dude.
Right.
And, what's the difference? Back then, I guess no one really knew how endearing Nathan Drake was going to be. Um, so yeah, ultimately, just to kind of jump right in, Uncharted 3, Drake's Deception. It was released in 2011 for the PlayStation 3, and then later on in the Nathan Drake collection. So that was done by Blue Point Games, and they cleaned it up pretty nicely. I think it runs at 60 FPS and might be 1080p as well. I'm
Mhm.
not sure, but it's a clean package, and they did that with all 3. So that's the version I played. Um, as far as the sort of premise of the game, you're partnered up with your childhood mentor, Sully, or Victor Sullivan, who I've mentioned before. He's in pretty much every game, I think, except for Lost Legacy. And basically, you're in search of this legendary lost city known as the Aram of the Pillars. Um, Once again, you're kind of competing with a gang of mercenaries led by another villain. So it's the same kind of premise as what you expect in these games. Her name is Catherine Marlowe. And interestingly enough, she's Sully's former employer. So there's a relationship there that
Hmm.
that Nate has to sort of digest and understand. Well, hang on a second, like you used to work for her, like this crazy witch. There was even a scene where she takes out an umbrella, and Nate says some cocky, cheeky remark like, "Oh, don't burn, witch," or something like that, which was really funny. Lots of quips in the Uncharted games. So for folks that haven't played, I think you're going to enjoy the sort
Mm.
of dark humor. Initial thoughts, it's a solid game. I think that this time it's a little bit more of I suppose, a humbling experience because coming from Uncharted 4 and then Lost Legacy and then going back to 3, whether it's the Nathan Drake collection or not, it was hard for me because I wasn't left as awestruck as I was left when I played 4 and Lost Legacy. I mean, those games are just absolutely AAA perfect diamond cut games. So when you
Mm.
go to 3, it's a solid experience, but don't forget this is a 2011 game that got a touch up.
Mhm.
So for me, I really felt that perhaps more than someone that were to go from 1 through 4, you're going to see that nice inclination of quality. But to go backwards, it's like anything else. You play, I don't know, just say like a later Silent Hill game, and then you go back, or excuse me, you go back and play 1, it's going to be a little bit painful.
Mm.
It's like that with anything, go back and play an N64 game. It's going to be not exactly a sight for sore eyes. So
Right.
ultimately, I just felt like it aged a little bit more than I was expecting. And I didn't really digest that. I thought there was going to be a point in the game where I was like, man, I'll get past this. It's just an initial phase of coming off of a perfect looking game. And for some reason, it just didn't really click.
Mm.
I think that it's ultimately is still a really good looking game, but visuals are important for me. And to go, from 4 to 3 like that, it's quite a big jump.
Mm.
But outside of that, it still holds up very well. Uh, some of the sort of polished climbing mechanics that are present in 4 and Lost Legacy obviously aren't here with 3. You kind of feel the lack of finesse with the way that Nate moves around, but it's still functional. It's
Mhm.
just like when you jump from say A to B, you're going to feel a little bit of clunkiness there because they just weren't as refined as they were with the later games, and that's completely fine.
Mm.
Um, Story wise, didn't really love it. I found it to be fairly unforgettable. Really, just because it was more of the same, and I guess I was potentially hoping for something different. And that's sort of premise works. Villain, gang of mercenaries. You're trying to find something, and they're trying to find the same thing as you, and you're kind of competing against them. But I don't know. I think it's ultimately the fact that I had played them out of order just kind of threw me for a loop.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to dive into that a little bit because I feel like had you perhaps played these in the order that they were released, these obvious faults might not have been obvious at all.
110%. I think that it almost goes without saying. However, I sort of would argue that because sometimes you can go back and you have a really good experience, but I think the way that these games pan out from visuals to story, it really is such a large inclination in quality from 1 through 4. Like there
Mm.
really is big strides between the titles, and there are other franchises where there aren't. Like for Mass Effect 1 through 3, granted I've never played them, there are visual upgrades, but
Well, I
I don't
mean,
know. I
there's
correct me if
also
I'm wrong, but they're not huge strides.
well from 2 to 3, no, there isn't a huge stride, but the gameplay from 1 to 2 is completely overhauled. They're not even close.
Okay.
So they took the gameplay from the first game and changed it completely into the second game, and then with that came a graphic overhaul as well too, because the game moved from being like this third person um over the shoulder kind of trying to think of what could be really compared to. It was like this third person just action game with like heavy RPG elements, and in 2 and 3 it moved into more of a Gears of War style cover shooter with RPG elements.
Mm.
And I think there's a lot of people that kind of go back and forth with the Mass Effect games as to whether or not the playstyle of 1 is better than the playstyle of 2 and 3. I personally think 2 and 3 are better games. There are things with 1 that are just insufferable, in my opinion. Of course, when the remastered collection comes out later this year, I'll probably have an updated view on that, depending on how overhauled it is, which, from what I hear, isn't really going to be a huge overhaul gameplay wise for the first game. It's still going to be essentially the same thing.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, well, that's a series I got to dive into at some point, and that's probably my place to start.
well, I mean, you have to start with the first game with those. If you're going to
Yeah,
play them all, you have to start with the first one, for multiple reasons, and we can get into that in another show.
sure. No,
But
that makes sense.
yeah, it's more
Um,
it's more than just story. Like there are layers to that, because you got to keep in mind with that franchise too, decisions that you make in game 1 absolutely play out in the third game. And nobody's playthrough is exactly the same. Like the dialogue trees in those games are massive and impactful. There are people that I've spoken to that have characters that died in their playthroughs that lived through mine, and vice versa. So
that's amazing.
it's it really is. I don't know how the hell they did it, but they did.
That's amazing.
So anyway, I'm sorry. Back to Uncharted.
No, no, it's all good. But yeah, just to kind of wrap up initial thoughts, I mean, it's a really good game. The voice acting, characters, and gameplay were all great, but I just felt like something was missing. And I can't stress the fact, without sounding like a broken record, that when you're coming from such amazing titles and you're going to something that's like really good but not astonishingly good, it has that sort of effect. And I think perhaps this is why you hear more about Uncharted 2, 4, and Lost Legacy more than you hear about 1 and 3. Because when I talk to people about Uncharted, they're always like, "Oh my God, 2 was amazing," and 4 and Lost Legacy, like it always just ends up being those 3, and I can see why. It's been a while since I played 1 and 2, but 2 had a tremendous story, and I just remember that game a lot more. So
Mm,
ultimately, if I were to give it like a sort of solid review from the jump, it would be a really good game. It's just not. It's not a great game, and it's just because you're comparing it to the other ones.
right.
But moving into gameplay, same kind of thing here. Nathan once again has a variety of animation sets. He can run, walk, jump, climb, swing, punch, swim, shimmy, and scale. You're still dealing with a lot of those crazy climbing mechanics that are totally unrealistic, but that's Nathan for you.
Yeah.
Same sort of equipment setup. You can hold up to 2 firearms and 4 grenades. So same kind of premise there. And then, if you kill an enemy and you're done with a wave of enemies, you can run over their bodies, pick up different weapons, and pick up, more ammo. So again, not much has changed there. Stealth mechanics are still present with stealth takedowns, so that's definitely my style if I can do so. Lots of duck and coverings, with shootouts. Um, and again, lots of journal use for solving puzzles and just kind of keeping notes of where you've been
Mm.
and what you're up to. And a lot of that is done automatically as an animation. So it's not like you can manually take out your journal, but you can't manually take it out and write in it. The
Mm.
writing part is where you might be walking into like a temple or a room, and Nate will take out his journal automatically, and you just see him kind of putting his head down, and like you can hear like a pencil, which is kind of cool. So all that kind of stuff is still there. My experience with the gameplay was good. Frustrating at times because I played in a pretty unconventional order. We already spoke about that. With 4 and the Lost Legacy, both were just kind of really masterful controls that have been really kind of massively ironed out
Mm.
after moving from 1 through 3. So it's sort of like eating like a New York City water bagel and then going to eat like a Thomas's bagel from Stop and Shop, and it's stale. Like that's kind of what's happening with Uncharted 3. You're like, you know what? This will suffice, but it's not that New York City water bagel that I got like a week ago
Yeah.
with the fresh cream cheese and the sprouts and all that good stuff.
Oh, you and your sprouts. Here we go. Anyway.
Oh, yeah. I just thought about that episode where I did like a rant on like the perfect bagel. I wish I could remember what episode that was. But anyway, that's kind of what it's like. It just ain't the same bagel, Drew.
I can understand that. It's a good analogy because as a bagel expert, as in I've eaten a lot of bagels.
And made them.
I have actually. I'm hoping to make some this week. But yeah, I got some Thomas's bagels in my pantry right now, and they are not as good by any stretch of the imagination of the ones that I made.
Oh, you jerk!
But you know what though? Sometimes you just need an adequate bagel.
Yeah. No, it's so true. But I mean, for anybody that has not eaten a good bagel in their life and they really think that Thomas's is the epitome, you were dead wrong, my friend. Bagels are oh my gosh, we can't talk about this right now. We can't talk about this right now. Anyway, once again, there are some borderline sort of unfair moments that occur while in the midst of shootouts. One, for example, is you might have a bunch of enemies that you're trying to take down with an assault rifle, and you're doing a great job for the most part, and then in comes this sort of walking tank of a dude, which they introduce in many of these shootouts, where you'll be like, trying to stave off 20 enemies, you're ducking behind cover, you're losing health, you're running out of ammo, and then they bring this fucking like, SWAT dude who's like covered in armor, has got a 12 gauge, like, crazy auto shotgun, and he's virtually bullet resistant with the armor he's wearing, and he'll walk like this tank, and you're shooting everybody else, you're shooting at him, and you're like, fuck, he's impenetrable. Like I can't figure out how to take him down. There are moments like that feel a little bit cheap because he'll just be walking, eating all your bullets, and he'll come right to where you are in cover and just blast you, and you're done. And I can't tell you how much rage that induced with me.
Cheap.
And here's the thing, like, it's cheap, but the cool thing about the enemy and the AI design is that it sort of forces you to think carefully about how you want to tackle your foes. Like, say if you die 3 times in a row because you keep killing the same 3 enemies at the same time, every time, you quickly learn that the order in which you take them down really needs to change. So there were many encounters where there's waves of enemies, and I had to think differently about who I was going to shoot first. So there was a lot of like, all right, guy to the right, 3, 2, 1, guy to the right pops out, guy to the left pops out. So a lot of it's timing because you'll die like I said, like 3 times, and then you go in the 4th time and you're like, all right, I'm getting the hang of this pattern now. This guy pops out first, I kill him, I wait 3 seconds, and this guy pops out in the left. He's got an RPG. Then you've got a guy off at the distance that has a sniper rifle that pops out 5 seconds after you kill that dude. And apparently they literally did that on purpose so that you had to figure out the pattern of who to kill first. And if you don't figure that part out, you will just die constantly.
Really?
You won't understand. You're like, what am I doing wrong? I run over here, I get shot every time. But if you pay close enough attention, you see that there's a sequence to it, and you have to figure out what that sequence is.
Hmm.
And I don't really remember that in 1 and 2, so I'm pretty sure that they implemented that in 3 and then brought it into 4 as well, because I do remember some moments, in 4 where I had to do things sequentially.
Interesting.
So that was kinda neat. And then at the same time, you're dealing with Sully who might be with you, who's like, "Nate, over here right now." And like you're like, "Oh shit, I gotta kill these 2 dudes and he's calling me over and we gotta go." Because like the ground is like literally crumbling beneath us.
Hmm.
Because there's a lot of moments where that'll be happening and then, fucking ground starts collapsing and
Interesting.
you're running Indiana Jones style. Sully's ahead of you. He's shooting everybody with his pistol and just one-shotting dudes, and you've got like a sniper rifle and you could barely even hit somebody. So, classic moments like that.
Oh man.
And as you could probably imagine, and hopefully I'm kind of painting a broad enough picture here, that there are really kind of strategically exciting moments, which is kind of a phrase that I coined
Hmm.
in this game. And I think it's frustrating, but it adds to the challenge and adds to the excitement, really, kind of overall.
Hmm. Interesting. Sounds
So
kind of
that
sounds kind of like a mixed bag, honestly.
it is. I mean, there's some shootouts that are pretty clean, black and white to the point. You're like, all right, there's 5 dudes. I know how to take these guys out. But they definitely throw you some curveballs and they put you in situations that keep you on your toes, quite literally.
Hmm.
And sometimes it can feel pretty cheap. Like I've had some moments where I jumped over, like, I don't know, like the ground's falling beneath me. I go to like jump from A to B and the jump wasn't timed like just perfectly, or I jumped on the edge of something and I
Hmm.
just fall and die. So there are moments like that that you're like, "Oh, come on, man." And then, like, when you have to do it again, luckily, they don't make you start from all the way in the beginning. It kind of picks up from when you're falling. So it's not that frustrating, but it can be because they can happen often enough where it causes a sort of annoyance. Um, so there's that,
Hmm.
but I wouldn't say it's game breaking. It's just it's frustrating.
Yeah.
It's definitely frustrating.
Yeah.
Um, Visuals, not a lot to say here, and that's a good thing. Good stuff all around. Like I said, not as great as 4 and Lost Legacy, but that's a given. Clear improvements over 1 and 2. Like you can definitely see that they improved a lot with mocap and the way that the characters' eyes move, and there's more emotion in their eyes, which is pretty compelling.
Hmm.
There are also moments where Nate will walk in between like a narrow hallway, and a lot of games do this now. The character will put their hand out and kind of touch the wall as they're moving through. And then tons of games now do that thing where like you're going through a crevice and you're doing like the whole shimmy thing
Mm.
and they bring the camera in. I can't tell you how many games I've experienced that, but that's like the latest thing that game developers do now. They're like, "Oh, we got to put like a tight crevice in and then zoom the camera in so they're shimmying through." So I think there was a couple of moments like that, but yeah, just small little details they added. The character models look great. Environments are stunning as always.
Hmm.
A lot of this game takes place in desert like atmospheres and or environments, and just sort of older villages. So
Hmm.
overall, the palette is a little bit more brown. If you're going to talk about like hues, it's not as jungle like as 4, which basically takes place in Madagascar. So the environment's different.
Right.
Um,
How'd you like the change of pace with the environment? Did you find that switching it up to that different palette and just being with something different than the jungle was working out for you, or do you think
it
it was
was
kind
all
of
right.
yeah?
It was all right. I mean, if I want to be honest, I really appreciate being in like forests and jungles and like near
Mm.
waterfalls, and I think Uncharted does that really well.
Hmm.
And with 3, you don't experience that as much. It's like I said, it's a little bit more city like at times, and some of the areas are just not as exciting.
Hmm.
There were no moments I don't remember at least that really blew me away, like 2, 4, and Lost Legacy.
Right.
Um, and I think that's why like there are moments that I just kind of struggled to think of anything that just kind of left me awestruck. And like I said, it's a good looking game. There are moments that I'm going to talk about in a second here that are pretty amazing, but visually speaking, there's nothing that's just like, oh my God, I got to take a picture of this and send it to Drew.
Yeah.
There's no moments like that. And you didn't get anything from me for 3.
Right.
Um, Music, kind of similar here. Nothing that memorable, as it's more of the same. A lot of sort of uplifting, adventurous orchestral tunes, which is great. The main theme that I shared this Monday, Nathan Drake's theme 3.0, I think it's called. Um, it's solid stuff, but there's nothing that's just like, wow, I gotta buy this soundtrack.
Right.
I would say that was more present with four than anything.
Okay.
Um, Sound design, not a ton here. I mean, everything sounds good. Guns are loud. They do a really good job with the gun audio. Um, I would say that sound design that I spoke of in 4 and Lost Legacy, where you can really hear things around you, that was not as present. It seemed like the sound design and the surround sound was not really up to par, but decent. Um, yeah, can't think of anything else really. I mean, if you want to, include voice acting, it's perfect. I mean, that is one thing that three's got going for it, is like the voice acting is pretty much every game in the series. It's all spot on, so I
Right.
really can't complain there.
Well, they spared no expense with the voice actors.
Yeah, they certainly did. I mean, most people know it's Nolan North as Nathan. He's just tremendous, and then the guy that plays Sully. All those guys are just top of their game, top tier voice acting. So it's hard to find any shortcomings there.
Yeah.
Um, so that was kind of a quick run through of some of those categories. I mean, kind of moving into memorable moments. I can speak of quite a few here. Mainly two. Excuse me. One would be the plane scene. A lot of people know three for having that extraordinary sequence where you have to literally catch a plane as it's taking off, and I'll explain that. So you literally have Elena, who's more or less your girlfriend at this time, drive you in a Jeep right up to the plane's landing gear while it's taking off. So
Mm-hmm.
picture giant cargo plane taking off on a runway. You're in a Jeep, you're kind of standing on top of the rail or the roll cage, and you're literally like telling her to speed up and like you're almost there. Total like over the top action movie moment. What you would expect from Uncharted. And the landing gear's down, it's going to take off any second, and you jump to the wheel. And as the landing gear is kind of retracting back into the plane, you're going with it, and you end up inside of like the landing gear's like sort of tunnel. So sort of a la Metal Gear Solid, you're sort of army crawling through this tunnel to get into the plane. And it's a cargo plane, so it's loaded up with a bunch of cargo and a bunch of bad dudes. And you encounter like a really big dude. So throughout Uncharted 3, they surprise you with like a really beefy, like brute kind of guy that you have to fight every once in a while, and they all look the same. Like they're literally like the character model is just the exact same fucking person, but with a different outfit on. And you fight him, and he's hard to take down. He tries to literally eject you from the plane by pulling on one of the levers that drops down like the cargo ramp. And he'll try to toss you out of the plane, and basically, what happens is he fails. He gets pretty close. You defeat him. And as he's now on the ramp and you've reversed roles, you take a piece of cargo, like just a big block of cargo that has one of those parachutes attached to it. And Nate scrambles to get it loose.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, his mission was to launch the parachute so it catches the wind, pulls the cargo, goes into him, and throws him right out of the plane. So that happens. And then you get caught up in some cargo. You almost fall out of the fucking plane, and there's all this cargo like literally like waving off the plane like in the wind in midair. At this point you're in mid-flight, and you're hanging on, classic Uncharted style, almost losing your life, hanging on by a thread. You're climbing up the cargo to get back into the plane, and then it's round two. You've got all the bad guys approaching. The plane's on fire at this point. I don't even remember how it gets on fire. And it's just over the top, right? Like it's very like Dark Knight Rises, Bane's trying to, take over the plane.
Right.
And you got the mercenary dudes all coming in. It's that kind of thing. So that was cool. Big shootout with them. Some frustrating moments where I died a lot. I can't remember why. It's probably another sequential issue. And long story short, what happens is the plane starts literally crashing and burning in midair. You eventually have to like jump out. You have no parachute. And I can't remember why he couldn't find one, but he didn't. He jumps out of the plane, and you literally are saved by a piece of cargo that's flying through the air conveniently towards you. And you go to like sort of Superman fly yourself into it. You grab onto it, you launch the parachute from the cargo the way you did with the bad dude, and you eventually land in the sort of desert. I don't know if it's the Sahara Desert, but it's definitely a big desert. You wake up, and this kind of moves into the second most memorable part of the game. You wake up, you're massively dehydrated, you're injured, you're probably hungry, you're in the middle of the desert, you have no idea like what to do and how to get out. So you just start walking. And this pretty incredible sequence takes place where it becomes almost like Journey, and the screen zooms out, and you're controlling Nathan, who's like this big at this point, and you're just walking throughout this desert. And there's no music,
Mm.
is from what I can remember, just the sound of the desert and the sand and the wind. And the reason why they did that, I think, was to create that sense of really being trapped in the desert. You're parched, it's hot, there's sand, there's wind, you're alone, you're probably going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And you keep going through this motion of walking through these dunes. You don't know where to go. I honestly was like, I don't know if I'm even going the right way, and I'm concerned because Nathan is walking so slowly that if I'm going the wrong way, in order to go to the right way, it's going to take me an hour.
Mm.
So I was like, shit, I guess I'm just going to wing it. So I'm tripping over the sand dunes. I'm sliding down some of them. And then he starts having the classic, like, illusionary situations where he sees, like, an oasis in the distance
Oh boy.
and all that kind of stuff that you would imagine. Yeah. That you would expect from being, guy trapped in a desert. And all that kind of stuff happens. You hallucinate. You eventually find yourself to, where you need to be. But that moment was memorable because I had never seen a game take something so far in terms of, like, let's put you in the desert and we're not going to give you any hints. We're not going to give you any items. We're not going to give you any music.
Mm.
We're just going to make you walk really slowly and, figure out what you need to do. I see Killer Sirach here says the introductory tutorial mission in Uncharted 3 is my favorite in the entire series. Are you talking about when Nate is in the tuxedo and you're just fighting a bunch of dudes in the bar? I'm interested to what he's going to say to that.
Yeah. Yes. Apparently he is.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that part was fun. You're banging dudes' heads on toilets and urinals and shit, and, like, I'm pretty sure, like, Nate gets his head bashed in. Of course, he's got, like, no scratch, no blood, and he's completely fine.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he's Nathan Drake, so what do you expect? But yeah, man, for the sake of time, I mean, final thoughts. It's an excellent game. For anybody that likes Uncharted, I think it's definitely, you don't want to miss.
Mm-hmm.
But just don't do what I did. Don't play the cream of the crop and then go back to 3.
Yeah.
If you're going to do that, go back and play 2, because I think 2 is so much stronger in so many different ways that you probably won't have that sort of, like, lackluster feeling.
Right.
And I don't want to downplay the game because it's an excellent game, but I think maybe this series is more important than I thought in terms of playing them in the right order to get the right kind of effect.
Yeah. I mean, I think generally speaking, for the most part, it really does benefit the player to play franchises in order.
I agree.
Not just from a storyline perspective, but for those gameplay fundamentals that are improved upon, iteration after iteration. So, there's a couple franchises that I've been kind of thinking about playing through. The Tomb Raider franchise, the recent, 2013 Tomb Raider is.
You're not going to do it alone, my friend.
Well, we can talk about that further.
We'll take it offline.
Yeah, for sure. Because we now have all 3 of those games. I believe you have all 3, right? Yeah, so I do too.
Sir.
So, I mean, that's just one example where, like, I've already played the first game and I didn't beat it, but I put a significant amount of time in it. But I'm not going to just jump into 2 or 3. Like, it's been so long since I played it. I'm going to play them in order, from the first game up.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I were to go backwards with that, I think there would be some serious plot holes and gameplay holes that would be extremely apparent. So
Yeah, I think the other thing too is, I mean, I wouldn't say that my opinion would change too much, but I mean, we've been doing reviews kind of late. These are games
Yeah.
that we've beaten some time ago, and with Uncharted 3, I'm pretty sure I beat it. I don't know. I think it was like middle towards the end of January, and even though that wasn't that long ago, it's February 15th to be fair.
Right.
And my mindset has just been in Gravity Rush 2, and I've kind of parted ways with Uncharted for now. So I don't know, like, maybe coming off of the high of playing 3, I might have had a slightly different review, but I doubt it. I remember finishing the game and I was like, all right, that was good.
Right.
But that's kind of all it was. It was just good. And that's not a bad thing. It's just not every game is going to be a masterpiece.
Yeah, and I think that's important to note too, because you came out and said that Uncharted 4 was possibly the best game that you had ever played.
Absolutely.
And you were
Still
definitive.
stand by that.
You were definitive when you said it too, and I was kind of taken aback by that. But I think what you just said here with this game puts it in perspective. You're willing to be objective with another game in the same franchise and acknowledge the faults that it has, and not everything is going to be a home run. Sometimes you just hit a single.
Yeah, and I think it would have been too convenient if I had played 3 and said, "Hey, this is another masterpiece," because
Sure.
it's so rare for that to happen. 2 is a
Absolutely.
masterpiece and 4 is a masterpiece. Lost Legacy is amazing, 3 is good.
Right.
And like that to me is like that's more of an honest scope, I think, of what's going on with these games.
I like it. I think it's well said. I'd like to play it, but I think I'll be far more conscious of doing it in order, and make a strong effort not to skip around.
Yeah, and I think you'll be impressed with the Nathan Drake collection too. They did a really nice job getting those games a little bit smoothed out.
Nice. Excellent. Well, did you have anything else that you wanted to add, or should we wrap it up and call it a night?
I don't think so, man. I think we said enough. These
Yeah.
games are meant to be played in order. So anybody that's looking to play them, take our advice. Don't do what I did.
So,
Don't take chances.
no chances. So, all right. So why don't we call it a night here? I just want to thank everybody again for tuning in. Thanks for being a part of the stream. Don't forget, we are live on Twitch every Monday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Of course, you can find us on the web at www.wdgrpodcast.com. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at WDGR Podcast. If you'd like to follow me, you can find me on Twitter at ScionStorm. And Will, if somebody wants to follow you, how can they do so?
SoundCloud.com/Will_Gear.
Alrighty. And got that little lower third rolling on the screen as we speak here. So everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. We will see you next time.
Thank you.